It's a book of hope, and it's a book of, I guess, identification for people who've been through trauma, mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction, and I made it through, and to let other people know that they're not alone, they're never alone, and they can make it through.
Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast, where I'm your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and I get to meet with amazing people that have come through amazing journeys, helping people and making a difference every single week. This is a highlight of the things I do during the week, and I'm so proud to be able to share that with you. Today, I have a guest who has a story, and his story is one that thankfully most of us don't go through, but we're going to be able to learn from the places he's gone, the things he's seen, and we're going to hear about not only how he made it through, but we're going to hear about what it's like to tell that story through a book. This new friend of ours is an author, and he's an experienced person in the corrections industry. He's got a wealth of knowledge for us. This is one that it's going to tug on your heartstrings. It's going to make you understand a different part of life, and you're going to enjoy this. You're going to want to share this episode with others. So without any delay, I want to welcome Mr. Steve Moffe to the show. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Jim. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And I know that you've been on a bunch of podcasts and you're getting a lot of traction around your book. It's an inside job, kid, and we're going to get to that. But before we do, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background to ease us into the show? Because you have this amazing story of overcoming this crazy abuse to addiction to recovery model, and how you got through that's fascinating. So can you just get us started with a little background?
Sure. I come from New York. I was born into a large family of 7 kids, and I graduated high school and went into the service, into the Navy. And afterwards, I joined the Department of Corrections in New York State. And I was with them for 19 years and experienced quite a bit of different aspects of corrections. I worked in shock incarceration, worked as a drill instructor for a short time, and then a network officer, which means you actually work with the inmates. And they were parole violators in the shock incarceration model that we worked in. And it was more of a hands-on kind of thing with the inmates who had violated parole, and it was usually drug related. So I worked in that area of corrections, but for the most part, I was working inside the prisons, and I had worked in 10 different facilities. I had a hard time. That wasn't for me, believe it or not, although I worked in the department for 19 years, and I ended up switching from different facilities, thinking the grass was greener on the other side of the fence somewhat, thinking maybe something's a little better than before, but it was all the same, and it's a tough environment for everyone. So anyways, that's kind of my experience in corrections. And then afterwards, I was struggling with my addiction since I was 12 years old, up until I was about 45.
Wow.
And,
decades.
Yeah.
You experienced decades. And in the meantime, you went through, I want to, sorry to interrupt you there. I want to unpack a little bit about what you're talking about. So you started engaging with or experimenting with substances at 13. Can you give us how that happened? Was it because of something in your family that you saw there, or were you hanging around with the wrong kids? Or how does a 13-year-old start this exposure? And what path did that take with you at home and with your friends and at school and all the rest? Because you ended up, going into service and all the other things. How did that work?
Well, I think it's all of the above. I mean, some of my oldest brother was a district manager for a beer distributor, and I ended up after the service. I ended up working there for a short time. My mother, who I wouldn't even classify her as a alcoholic, I think she was a maintenance drinker because of the relationship that she had with my father, and I think having 7 kids. It wasn't an everyday thing for her. It was just a weekend thing. But I noticed when she was drinking at my age, about 12, I noticed that with all the emotional and physical violence that occurred, that her release was having a few drinks with her sister, my aunt, on the weekends. And this was a pattern for most of my life living at home. And I took a notice to that and thought, and of course, kids that age, you see back then you had beer commercials, cigarette commercials, and made it look glamorous. And of course, some of the crowd that I hung around with, they like to, get the booze and have a good time. And so I fell into that group. And I think that for myself, I needed an excuse, anything I could find to numb the pain that I was feeling, the emotional pain, the sense of isolation that I felt, the loneliness, not feeling understood, not having anyone to talk to, I think was a big thing, because a lot of the things that happened in our home, once it was over, it was done. It was just sacked away in the timbers. I don't know if that's the right word. In your mind,
yeah.
way back in the subconscious. I shouldn't get too fancy with words and get caught up with that. But yeah, you bury it down in your subconscious, and of course, as we know, it comes up. It'll find a way sooner or later if it's not dealt with. And they talk about with your emotions, embracing them, and then letting them go, accepting them, letting them go. I didn't have that that type of ability. I wasn't taught that. No one teaches you. Back in the 60s and early 70s, you don't know anything about how to deal with emotions except to bury them, don't cry, don't complain. And that was pretty much what it was like.
And you didn't have a support system from your family, it sounds like, because of the activities and the abuse going on and just the way things were. You didn't have that. Your friends were kind of into some of the same things. I'm interested, did that impact, or of course it impacted, how did that impact your early life growing up? Were there things that you wish that you could have done but you couldn't because of this situation, like play sports or be involved in this or be involved in that? Because something led you to join the Navy out of high school. What were you trying to escape that whole thing? Is there a tie in there at all?
Well, first I want to make it clear that I love my family today. I love my father, and of course I love my mother and my siblings. We're not that close right now, but back then I think the head of the household, my father, everybody kind of followed his lead as far as how you deal with things. And I think that there was a disconnect early on with my older brothers, except my closest older brother. We were somewhat close, and they were, 7 kids. The age difference was spread out quite a bit. And I just, my 3 older brothers, they hung out together, and then there was the rest of us. So I'm not going to point the finger at anybody. I mean, there comes a time through the phases of your life where you hold your parents accountable, you blame somebody else. But ultimately, as you grow, you understand that, yes, those things happen. But right now that I'm aware of how it happened and what happened, it's up to me to deal with it and find ways of doing healthier things for myself. So that old type of thinking doesn't interfere with my adult life.
Right, that's tough, but boy, that's a big ask of a 15, 16, and 17-year-old, right? To have that kind of self-awareness. Do you find that you gained that self-awareness early because of this, or was that something you gained after years of looking at it in therapy and whatever else that you did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what made you join the military then?
Well, that was the tradition of my family. My father was in it. My uncles were in it. Some of my uncles were in the Army Air Corps and the Army, and I think, I'm not sure if any of them were in the Marines, but that was more or less expected to go into the service because my father believed he didn't push college, never push college, at least for any of us that I'm aware. but he wanted us to go into the service because it taught you discipline. And that was the big thing. And not only that, my older brothers, I had one older brother stationed down in Florida, and my mother took my youngest brother and sister and myself, my one older brother, to Florida, where he was stationed. We got to go out on his destroyer out to sea, and they fired the 5-inch gun. I was 13, I think 13 or 14 years old at that time, 13. And I was hooked. I wanted to be in there. I loved it. Being out in the ocean, the power of the ships, they exhibited what the ship could do. I got to go in the radar room, and it was just, I couldn't let it go. So
nice.
I joined. And I must say that I wanted to be in college. I had a desire to do that. A lot of my schoolmates that went to college, some big name colleges, I wanted to do that too. Plus my older brother, became a doctor, became a vascular surgeon. I had another brother that became a captain in the New York State Police, and my other brother was in business. So they were all successful, and all of them went to college. I went to college piecemeal. I went to community colleges and finally got my degree after I was sober. But getting back to the military part, that was expected of us. So,
and when you went there, what was it like? And maybe it was a respite for you to struggle with your addiction and grapple with it during the military, or was that a heavy part of that experience too?
Well, my experience in the service lasted less than a year. I received an honorable discharge, and to make a long story short out of this, I had been misled by the recruiter about I wanted to be a hospital corpsman. And I had the qualification after the testing, the ASVABs. And because I had experimented with marijuana, which he kind of coaxed me into admitting that, in the sense that he said my brother, my older brother, Mike, had also went into the Navy months before me. And he had said to me in the office when I was supposed to pick my A school, he said, so your brother tells me you may have tried marijuana. And I thought, and he didn't. He never said that. He may have admitted it himself. I don't know. But I found out later he never said anything to the recruiter about that. But he had coaxed me into picking a different job because at the time, the old GI Bill, everybody was trying to get in 1976. And so they had to fill quotas. Later on you figured it out, and he got me to go into something else or pick something else other than corpsman. I guess there was a lot that were filling those ranks. And later on, I was getting in fights in the service, and I was unhappy that I couldn't become a corpsman. And so a gentleman, another warrant officer, had helped me out and asked me what the problem was. And I told him my story, and he says, well, let's see if we can't get you what you want. And eventually it came to the point where we signed a contract, and I was able to work as a corpsman aboard the ship that I was going to be on. So when I got on the ship, I did what was required. I did my temporary duty assignment, which was for 3 months. And there was a bully on the ship who I got in a fight with. There was no charges. I didn't get sent to the brig because the guy was bullying other guys. And my master chief said, don't ever do it again. But maybe this guy learned his lesson. And it was all done and over with. And then when I went to the guy and said, hey, I did my thing, I'm ready to go. When can I start in sick bay? And he says, there's no effing way you're going to work in my department. You got in a fight. And that was it. And the moral of that story is that when that happened, instead of me fighting it or going and saying, wait a minute, you can't do that, I had a signed contract, I gave up right there. I didn't say anything. I went into a deep depression. I ended up taking a bunch of pills, and Tylenol and Chloroquine and high blood pressure. I just took a bunch of them. And they had trouble waking me up, sent me to sick bay, sent me to a psychiatrist later. And ultimately, I got the discharge. the honorable discharge because the commander who had spoke with me, the psychiatrist, he offered it to me. So that was my story in the service.
Got it. And Steve,
And
when was it that you were acutely aware that the substances of alcohol and whatever else may have been alongside that they had control of you versus you, quote unquote, having control of them? Was there a wake up moment when you hit bottom, and what was that like?
I had several bottoms, Jim. I had several bottoms. The last bottom, well, first of all, let me begin by saying I entered rehab in my third year working in corrections. And there was a lot of violence. There was PTSD, a lot of incidents happened, stabbings and stuff. And I dealt with it by my drinking and doing cocaine, smoking pot. I mean, that's how I coped. And they gave me a choice. They said either I go to a rehab or I'm out the door. So that was 1984. So I went to the rehab. That lasted, I was going to meetings, I was doing the deal, but then I got away from it. And I'm sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, basically I was wanting to see, with respect to you understanding when this thing had a grip on you that you needed help with. So it sounds like it was in that time of your life, in the middle of that correction stint, when you're like, man, I better, I'm busted, I better get help.
I was out of control, and they forced that upon me. I wasn't going to get the help. That was, as a matter of fact, the employee assistance program coordinator had said, we'd like you to go to the rehab. And I said, I'm good. I know I got to slow down. I was trying to reason myself out of it. And he says, you don't understand. They're giving you a choice. Either you do it or you're out the door. So I went. And when I really think that I realized, I need to do something or it's going to kill me. I let someone shoot me up with heroin. And that was when I was about 41, 42. I had separated from my wife. I was missing my kids. That was probably the biggest bottom I had. And after about a year, I went back to another rehab, and that was on my own. And that didn't quite work. And then finally, there was a point where I was ready to take my life. And some miraculous things happened. I can't explain them. I was raised Catholic, but I've kind of got away from that. But the universe, somehow things just played out that I came that close. And when that happened, I never looked back. I went to counseling, of course, in conjunction with going back to meetings, because I had stopped going to meetings. That was when I was about 45. And that is about the time of my life when it turned around for me.
Oh, that's amazing. And would you say that there was a quote unquote conspiracy of events, of good things that happened to help you not take your life? Or was there something where you just said, bang, like this, I can't do this, I'm up to this point? Was it your kids, you need to be there for your kids? Is there anything that you can remember? Because that might be something that people watching or listening, they might be feeling what you're feeling and be in a place where they don't know what to do. And there's a guy named Anthony Robbins that a lot of people are familiar with, Tony Robbins, and he's like, look, until you say no more, until you say this is the moment, that it's easy for it to drag on, like you had said, right? Or you're like, oh, I'll get better, no, I'll slow it down. There has to be a reckoning with yourself. And sometimes it comes through a divine intervention, like you're talking about, that kind of thing. What was your story there?
Well, I had gotten to the point where I went on disability because I was diagnosed when I left corrections. It was on disability because I received the diagnosis of PTSD and bipolar disorder. And I was struggling with it. I was put on disability, and that I had a hard time dealing with, to be labeled disabled. That really weighed on me. And there's when I picked up, and that had to do with the heroin and doing cocaine and doing all these crazy drugs. And besides drinking, that I thought, I didn't want to live anymore. I was going nowhere. I was separated, and, I could visit my kids, see them anytime I wanted to, but I had them once a week, and that was taking me down. And I was at the bottom there. I was still drinking and doing all the wrong things. And at one point I was living in an apartment, and I had received a phone call from a bill collector, and I had sent a payment in. It had to do with Verizon. And this guy was harassing me, and I had sent the payment in, albeit late, but I had sent it in a couple of days before this phone call. And he's harassing me and saying, I'm going to have to stop at your door to come and knock on your door until I get what I want. You need to pay up and all this. And I kept explaining it to him. And finally I said, I'm going to blow my effing brains out. Leave me alone. And I hung up on him. And I called Verizon, and pretty much the same thing. We can do nothing about it. There's nothing we can do about it. It's already been sent to the bill collector. I'm sorry, that yada, yada. And I was just at the end of my rope, and I was searching for cash because I was paying for alimony and I was paying child support. So I didn't have much. And there too, I said, I'm going to blow my effing brains out. And I hung up the phone. Well, I sat there for about 45 minutes, and I just contemplated taking my life. I was in the apartment alone. It was an upstairs apartment. There was a banister that went up, stairway that went up to the apartment. And I was contemplating or planning hanging myself. And I did it in such detail. It's even upsetting when I think about to the detail that I planned this out, and I was about to do it. Didn't want my feet to touch the floor, hanging from the banister, letting myself down so I didn't break the banister because of my weight. I just right down to the very details. And close to 45 minutes, I just kept doing this. And in my mind, and suddenly I started feeling nauseated because I was anticipating what I was about to do. You think about your kids, but I felt like such a failure at that point that I kept pushing those good things out. I can't do this. I can't take this anymore. So I actually got up to go to my bedroom to get a sheet. I plan on ripping it in strips, the whole thing. And as I got up and I'm walking slowly, physically, I was just so nauseated because I knew this was going to be it. And suddenly the phone rang, and it brought me back into the room. And then it rang again. And I thought, okay, maybe it's my mother. Who knows? My sister. I walked over to the phone and I picked it up, and the voice on the other end and said, hello, Steve. And I said, who is this? And the woman had said, this is Angela. I'm from the suicide hotline. How could this be?
Wow.
How could it be? And I said, well, why are you calling me? She goes, there was a woman at Verizon who called us and told us what you had said. And it gets me emotional when I think about it.
Oh my gosh.
Coming that close and having that happen at that point was like, oh my God. It was divine intervention. I have no other belief other than that. And there's a couple of other things that happened before that, which was another divine intervention moment that I didn't even mention. But at that point, she talked with me for about 10, 15 minutes and made sure I was okay. And I felt better, just knowing someone cared. Not that my family didn't, or the separation from my wife and my kids, but at that point, hearing that voice, that, you know, it made all the difference in the world.
What an incredible role. You know, I know that for me, that was like a fresh, needed slap in the face as far as that kind of service. I don't know how many people get that kind of a phone call, and the role that those people play on these kind of hotlines and those kind of things for strangers. To me, you always think of, you know, the in-person intervention, going to therapy, whatever these kinds of things are. But wow, this is something. Did you delve any more into, now that you're kind of looking at this from a different perspective, how common it is for perfect strangers through hotlines to get involved in suicide cases?
I don't know, Jim. I'm still, when I still think about it, I don't know how often that happens.
Yeah.
But the woman at Verizon, whomever she was, God bless her. I mean, this was back in 2005. I don't, you know, as I was saying before, there was another God moment, if you will. And it was when, in 2005, just before this point, I should back up and explain that there was something that you mentioned that Tony Robbins said. And it was a Super Bowl Sunday in 2005. It was in February. I think it was February 6th, I believe. And because I count it's February 6th. I was in the bar in my regular watering hole, and I was by myself, figuratively, because everybody around me, people were drinking and partying, having a great time at the bar, watching the game. Halftime came. I remember I had a bottle of Michelob, and I took a sip, and I looked at the halftime score, and I looked down, and I just remember saying to myself, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And it was at that very point, something took over, and I left the bar. I went home. The next day, I got to stop drinking. You know, I got to stop drinking. And I was looking on the computer for a job, and it was difficult because I was labeled disabled, and it was difficult finding work. And I knew that was a lifesaver because, you know, keeping busy and productive is very important. So I was looking on the computer, and then I had a newspaper next to me. I opened the local newspaper, and I'm looking in the help ads. And in between the help ads, there was a little ad that said something about a novena and prayer. And it said, if you say this prayer, I believe it was 5 times, recite it 5 times, you will get your wish or something, or God will work in your life or something like that. And I said, oh gosh, you got to be kidding me. And at the bottom, it said, you will receive a phone call within 3 minutes. That's what it said.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, all right, I'll bite. I had to, what have I had to lose? What did I have to lose here? So I recited the novena. And then when I finished, I looked at the clock and I said, okay, 3 minutes, let's see what happens. And I sat there and I waited. I said, this is ridiculous. I felt like a fool, to be honest. And I sat there, and about 15 seconds before it was 3 minutes, the 3 minutes were up. And I feel like a fool sitting here expecting this. And about 10 to 5 seconds before the 3 minutes was up, the phone rings.
Oh.
And I thought, no, it's got to be my mother, you know. Again, the phone. I picked up the phone, and I picked up the old phones, and I listened into the receiver, and there was no sound. And I said, hello? Hello? No sound, no response. I hung up the phone, and I said, well, I guess that's my message. I went in, I was taking 5 different prescription drugs for my bipolar disorder. And I threw them all away. I would never recommend anyone do this, and you as a doctor would of course agree with this. But at this point, nothing was going to stop me. And so I got rid of them all. I started walking 3 miles a day and getting myself back in shape. And, you know, a week later, I quit smoking. quit drinking, quit the prescription drugs, quit smoking, all within a week and a half. And leading up to the story of the suicide part, I believe that's partially what happened when I went into a deep depression, was because of the way I did it.
Yes.
I would pretty much bet on that. So that was the first got shot, and the second one was the second phone call. So these came through phone calls, and you wonder, did I manifest this? How does this work? What? I haven't tried to explain it to others, and I would not. I would leave that up to others to decide what it means to them and how it could help them or someone else.
Absolutely. Well, you did find help in the form of horses. How did that come across? How did you begin working with horses, and then what did that teach you to help you with your sobriety?
Well, I had finished my college. I got a degree in sociology and media studies, and once that was done and my two daughters were both in college, it was my time. I could leave. And we talked about this. I talked about this with my daughters. So I was on my way out west, and I wanted to be out west. I'd always read books, saw movies. I loved movies. I loved acting. I wanted to make my way to California eventually. But I ended up in Colorado, and I was working at a robotics company in Boulder. And for my free time, I was still attending meetings, but I needed to keep busy. I was always taught in AA, help others, get out of your own head. That's what you do. Well, helping animals was the choice I made. In Hygiene, Colorado, I'm sure you may be familiar with Hygiene.
Yes, sir.
There was a horse rescue. Shirley Huffman was the woman out there who trained me on how to take care of horses and treat horses. Wonderful woman. Her and her partner, Paul. And Shirley, by this time, was in her late 60s, I believe. But I worked at this horse rescue, and I learned how to take care of horses. I always loved horses. And that went on for a number of months. And then I ended up working at there was another advertisement for work, volunteer work, and it was at a hippotherapy ranch, which is a mode of a treatment for people who are autistic, had trauma, those kinds of things that need stimulation. And that's just one aspect. Hippotherapy covers a lot of ground, but that's basically what they do. And the therapist, and I started working there, and the therapist had trained me, how to work with them while they're working with clients on the horses. The movement stimulates their brain. It gets into a lot of stuff, but basically that's what it does. And these autistic people, it was amazing. They would move, they would talk, they would smile. It made a difference. So I worked there for about 3 months, and then, and it was fulfilling. And, I did it, I mended fences like Desperado. I did that stuff too. And, I love that song because I related a lot to it. And I eventually put an ad or put myself out there for ads on Horse Groom, horse.com, all these different avenues to work at horse ranches. And my first offer was up in Idaho, Emmett, Idaho, at Appaloosa Ranch. And from there, I went to Washington, and there's an interesting story there. California, Arizona. I traveled from coast to coast wherever I was called, and I was usually done at one place. Other places, I didn't think I was qualified. I'd move on and, give them notice. I didn't just take off, except for one place where I had trouble with the owner I think it was a jealousy thing. I'm not sure. But basically, it was a wonderful experience with the horses. That helped me along because I traveled for almost 3 years around the country and by myself. And that was, I believe, my saving grace. And I also attended meetings in different states. I got a lot of exposure to a lot of wonderful people too.
That's so good. And do you still work with horses? Is that part of your world these days?
Right now, it's not. I've done so much since then. After the horses, I took up acting. I'd been acting in New York, and then when I get out, I landed in Sedona, Arizona, and I worked at a radio station as a soundboard operator and announcer, and I did that for a short time, and then took acting classes, and ended up in California. I was in a bunch of TV shows, and this is a part of the book that I couldn't put a lot in on this, but it was like living your dreams, becoming sober, becoming clean, and living out these dreams.
Yes.
I had these dreams since I was a kid.
Right.
And I was on Parenthood. I was on like 20 some shows, TV episodes, and a couple of movies, Hail Caesar with George Clooney. And I was just background in those things. But what an experience. I got to meet a lot of the actors and some, it was wonderful. All I can say. And after I did that, I returned to Sedona because I just didn't have the confidence to go on in the acting at that point. And I met my partner, my now partner, Ann, who had some grandkids who were abused. Because of their autonomy, I'm not going to get into it, but they were pretty badly abused. And she told me about it. And we weren't dating, we were friends. She offered me some work and we became friends. And then she told me about this, and she would be having custody. And I decided, it took a couple of months, we started dating, and I decided this is it. This is what I want to do. So from the horses to the acting, and then meeting Ann, and here in Colorado now, we're both raising her grandkids. And another new challenge in my life.
Yeah.
And,
well, speaking of challenge, you decided to write a book, and it's not an easy feat. I've written one very small book with a workbook, and I did it back in '96. So it's certainly been, a long time ago since I undertook that effort. But your book is called "It's an Inside Job, Kid." Can you give us the inspiration on what made you decide to write the book, and kind of the philosophy of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Here it is right here. The book is on Amazon. Whoa, sorry. Is on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. It's on all three for reading, listening, and hearing. So yeah, reading, listening, and Kindle.
Whatever we call that these days.
The Audible. I'm all nervous. What can I say? But this book, it was difficult. No one should be under the impression that, I'm just going to write a book. It went through a lot of edits for nearly 4 years that I was doing. And of course, and I knew this before I started, you don't edit your own work. But I had difficulty with one editor, and it just didn't get done. And so finally, I got a good professional editor to do it, and it's fine. It's a good book. I believe.
What do you hope to get across in the book, Steve? What is the main message that you would want people to take away from that work?
Well, the main message is that you're never alone. If you read my book and you see all the foolish choices I made and all the mistakes I made and how I recovered from them and what I had to do to recover, it's a book of hope, and it's a book of, I guess, identification for people who've been through trauma, mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction, and in the end, it came out to love, and that was with Ann and I and what we're doing now together. The other thing I did want to point out with this people struggling with mental health issues is I struggled with it for 12 years. I went through shock treatment. I went through quite a bit that I never thought I'd come back from. I really didn't believe the direction I was going and what was needed to help me. And people ask, did that shock therapy help? And I would have to say yes. I mean, it cleared my thinking, but it was pretty intense. The whole experience was pretty intense, and I made it through. And to let other people know that they're not alone, they're never alone, and they can make it through. that's pretty much it. You're never alone.
Is there, going to the electroconvulsive therapy, were you ordered to do that, or was that something that was
No.
recommended that you said, okay, I'll try it? And was it something that you had to do a lot, or was it a few times in a series and then it was done? How did you know it was complete?
Well, it was offered to me by a wonderful man. He was very helpful with getting me well, and he had suggested it. And then, of course, I was also mixing alcohol with my prescription medications. I mean, let's not forget that, the foolish things that I did, mixing those. But because of that, I was in a bad way. And finally I said, well, what about the shock treatments? I'd like to try it. And all told, it was about 12 treatments. And it cleared up my thinking, the rumination, the being stuck. I was a big thing for me, and I'm sure it's probably for many other people, was being stuck in the past, what happened to you, and the unfairness that life is. I mean, life isn't fair or unfair. Life just is life. And of course, we pick up these beliefs when we're very young, and it's about change. It's also, the book is about change and recovery. I should mention that. And, they say death and taxes are always a thing in life, and so is change. And I'd put that number one.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree. That happens every day versus taxes once a year and death once.
Yeah. And we fight it. We fight it just like we fight the other stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And the more, I think, from my perspective, the more we can understand that change is a constant and we embrace it and understand how to navigate the world or the waters of change, it's at that point where, Jim Rohn, who was Anthony Robbins' original mentor, says that you can put it's you can look him up. He's got some great stuff. It says that you don't control the wind, but you control the direction of the sails. So if we're all on our own boat, and that change and that triumph and tragedy, it's all coming in our life, how we direct those sails determines our charted course. So I really, really, really appreciate that. And the openness that you've had in sharing this with us, Steve, is amazing. And as I was looking through some of your past and your history and going through all the information for our show today, I noticed that you had some life philosophies, and I think they're worth bearing. You've talked about a couple of them in resilience and helping others and passing it on. What about the belief that miracles happen, just keep believing? I know that's one of your philosophies. Give us the background of that.
Well, the miracles, which I think we discussed, I would consider them miracles, is and the resilience. That was another thing. There's a lot of different things in the book. My former counselor back in New York had read the book, and what she came away with from the book was resilience. It was, the resilience. And that was a big part of it, besides you're never alone when you're having to deal with this. The belief that you get, it's about changing beliefs. I'm sorry, what was that question, Jim?
No, we were just going through your philosophies. You were talking about the art of resilience, and then also not being afraid to ask for help. That's another big one that you've highlighted in your work.
Ask for help. Yeah, it's humbling, but it's life-saving. And there was I put a quote in there. It was, I don't know if it, I've researched it several times, but there's a quote in there that I put at the end of one of the chapters, and I forget which one it is. It talks about acceptance, and it was after an experience when I was young, and something foolish I did to try to fit in with life, trying to fit in with life and people and kids at that age. And I had allowed some things to happen, but then it was some things the thing that happened that I'm specifically talking about were by other boys. And I lived with that for a long time, and it was a humiliating experience. And at the end of the chapter, I put, and I think it's a Zen master who had said it, but it goes like this: when you blame others, you have a long way to go. When you blame yourself, you're halfway there. And when you blame no one, you've arrived.
Wow.
So it's acceptance. And to me, it's acceptance. This is life. And that ultimately, you can't blame anybody. You just live life and do the best you can. All those pieces that we've mentioned, Jim, is what it takes. It takes a lot of different things, but the one thing is you're never alone. To those people out there, that you're never alone, and ask for the help. There's very caring and loving people out there. Be open to it, and not pick up. You can say all those things, but the first thing I would say is get help. Make the phone call. In my book, I've got a list for all of the phone numbers for the suicide hotline, the crisis text line, SAMHSA, the National Helpline, Alcoholics Resource Line, and Nar-Anon and Al-Anon organizations. And those are some of the people you can call. But you can't get better without asking for help, because people can't do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. No one's going to do it for you. You may have had offers, but if you're not ready to start getting better, then I guess you have to wait till you hit bottom or another bottom, like I did.
Wow.
I hit a couple of bottoms. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, you have taken us on a journey of truth, of understanding, and I'm telling you, it's something that has really connected with me as far as the process and the path that you've taken. I know that you mentioned that the book is available on, that you can get it on Kindle, you can get it on Amazon. Just one more time, if people want to connect with you, Steve, and either hear your story, talk with you, meet with you, or get your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, in the back of the book, or no, it's in the front of the book, is my email. I've included my email here. Yeah, where is it? It's in there somewhere. I thought it was on the front with the credits. My email is smoffe1@icloud.com. That's smoffe1@icloud.com. And people can send me an email if they want any more information, whatever. And I've got a full schedule with two kids, a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old. But yeah, the number's there, and if I can offer any information or direction how to get help, please have them drop me a line.
Absolutely. And Steve, this has been a real treat for me. I wish you nothing but the best for your life, number one, and your book, number two. The fact that you're willing to help raise two grandkids, and spend that time and energy with them, with your partner, it just says so much about you. And so just know you always have a friend in me and in us in Ramos Law. And I want to thank you for the time today.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say, for those who buy the book, I've been accused of spilling my guts, but it helped me. And if it can help someone else, I hope they get it and read it and help themselves.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. And so for those of you where this twinged your heartstrings, or someone who's going through a difficult journey, pick up the book, check it out, and then send us a comment about it. So until next time, keep making a difference out there. Just like Steve's making a difference, you can make a difference too. Everyone, take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.